Hello, everyone. I am Corey Andrew Powell, and it is an honor today to be joined by Pashtana Durrani. Pashtana is an Afghan human rights activist whose focus is girls' education, and she's also the founder of LEARN Afghanistan, which is a grassroots organization established to safely and securely provide education to girls through a distributed network of tablet computers and using an offline platform. Pashtana, welcome to Motivational Mondays.
Thank you so much for having me.
It is my pleasure. And I do want to stress right there in that opening when I mentioned the Learn Afghanistan platform is offline. Is that a specific function that is purposeful so that it's not trackable? Can you talk a little bit about that?
I think one of the reasons that we work with offline platforms like Rumi or like Skills Ed, the reason that we use those modules is because we don't have a lot of internet in Afghanistan and also not a lot of electricity. So imagine you're a kid in a mountainous region and you still want to access learning material, but you don't have internet. And I come from a district where the mobile signals go down on 6 p.m. So imagine internet is a big luxury. So the offline module is just to make sure that if you want to learn in the night, if you want to learn in the evening, if you want to learn any time of the day, you don't have to worry about the internet. That's the most important part.
That's amazing. So you've already uploaded the curriculums basically, and they just go through it on their own.
Yeah, yeah. So it's different models. Over the course of years, we have perfected a lot of models for different because not every child is the same. So if you are in a rural region and you want to access our learning materials, but you don't have a learning in-person space like we have for some people in different regions, you can download all the content, or we can help you download all the content on that platform, and you can access it anytime, and you can study at your own pace. If you have questions, you can just reach out to us through Facebook or something like that, or you can just call the facilitators. And then there's another model which we call hybrid that we are running right now in the secret schools, where we collect all these students in the same space, but the teachers teach them through Google Meet. And what they do is like they use the platform when they're at home. And because we don't have the whole day to teach them, they only come for 3 hours, 2 hours, given the situation. So that when they go back home, they use that platform to learn. Then we have a radio component where kids who might not know about us, Afghanistan is a big country. So there's an education hour where they just listen to our program and it's given an auditory lesson. So yeah, all those models.
Yes, and I know that's a big deal for you because I read the part about you being in love with Encarta.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. That was such a big space for me. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, I mean, but you learned a lot there, though. I mean, it was funny how you said it didn't really equate to what they thought was important, but you learned so many
Oh
facts, and
yeah.
I think a lot of people learn that way. They just absorb it. So I love that you said students learn differently. So you're adjusting your modules to work with that.
Yeah.
Now, to date, you have educated 7,000 girls and boys in Kandahar, Afghanistan, trained more than 80 teachers digitally so they can facilitate these programs. And then you also have initiatives for girls' health as well, like menstrual hygiene. And you really are making a difference in these girls' lives. But I want to just talk about how you got there because you yourself, you have a long history of being an educator, if you will, because you started like at 7 years old,
Yeah.
right? In your father's school, was it?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So talk a little bit about that because I want to just tell you before I begin, I want to hold up your book, which is an amazing book called Last to Eat, Last to Learn. Make sure I get my glare off the book there. Um, your father is a rock star to me.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Oh, he is so incredible. So, and your mom's awesome too, but your father had this very different position from an Afghan father point
Perspective.
of
Yeah.
view. And so I would love just to talk a little bit about the influence your father had and how you were educating people with him at 7 years old.
I think when people talk about Afghan men, all they see is like men who are controlling or who are the sort of people who don't want a lot of liberty for their kids. I remember when I was 5 years old, he was like, "Your only ticket to freedom from this craziness is like if you get educated." And it's not like a father, like, normally people are like, "Oh, you'll get educated, you'll go somewhere." He was like, "No, that's your only freedom ticket." Later on, I understood why he said that because as much as my father was a progressive man, when he passed away, there was a crazy world that I entered where all my uncles, my cousins, really wanted me gone from that space where I wanted to take over his position. But then you look at this space where he created not this for me, he created this for his sister, because his sister was divorced in a place, in a space where divorces were not common. You don't do that in tribal rural regions, and you don't do that in our community. And she had a divorce, and she was sent to study post that, and then she comes back. And one thing I remember is like, my dad didn't become a feminist because of me. I'm gonna be honest. He became a feminist because of his mother and sister, what they went through, the repressive cultural norms or the social norms that we have in place. And he's like, I want to change that for everyone. And he started with his sister. Then I came into the play. Of course, I did resemble his mother a lot, so that was a win-win for me. But the best part was like, he was not choosing women to do that for them. Oh, she's my daughter, I'm going to do it for her. She's my second daughter, I'm going to. No, for him, every village girl is supposed to come to the school and learn. And the funny thing is, which I hated back in the day, was like, I used to go to this private school in the morning, and I used to study all subjects in English. And then in the evening, because we had a two-time school for younger girls in the morning, for older girls who couldn't make it in the morning because they were doing house chores, would come in the evening. And I was forced to sit with those girls and teach them everything I learned in the school. So if I was learning anything in English, I was supposed to do that. And for me, it was horrible because it's like, I learned the morning time. I did my time. Why am I doing it
Right, right, right,
again?
right.
But I was taught like, this is your social responsibility. If you're privileged enough to be able to afford a private school, you should be sharing that knowledge. And I think a lot of that subconscious conditioning is the reason that um, this makes me feel that we are responsible for our communities and our country, and we should be the one doing everything to build from scratch. So yeah, a lot of that. But I do remember like my father being the sort of person who's like, your way out of this chaos is education, or make this chaos better, one of the two things. So yeah, I admire him for doing that, and he has stood up to his own brothers for me, to his own community. I mean, when I was 14, I was sent to a boarding school, and I remember people, his cousins telling him, what if she brings bad name? And my father was like, so what? Like, she'll bring bad name and then she'll marry the guy. So what? Like for him, saying that is a big deal. But he was okay with that, or he had to make himself okay with that, comfortable with that thing. And I'm so fortunate that now people in my family who were not sending their daughters to school send their daughters to school because of me. So it's not just because of me, but because of my father. But it's an important step, including in my own family.
Yeah, it's wonderful. You're carrying on his legacy because, through the pages of this book, his passion for education comes through, and his passion for wanting you to learn comes through. And I just want to, I love these moments so we can really clarify some things for people who don't understand certain cultures. When you say bring on a bad name, would that be marrying outside of the Afghan culture? Is that what that would mean? Or for you to do something that was dishonoring, or what would that mean
So
exactly?
it's a lot of things. It's a lot of things. You could be hanging out with friends that are not good company. You could be heading somewhere without a scarf or without your proper hijab.
Mm.
Even to this date, like if I upload a picture on my WhatsApp status without a scarf, my sister's, why are you doing this? Don't do that. Okay, I'm like, okay, control, calm down.
Right, right. I'll put the scarf on. Okay. Right. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and I'm not saying it's a repressive thing. It's just a sort of thing that we're conscious about. It's sensitive towards our own community,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
or like I fall in love with a guy because I was going to a co-ed private school. So he's like, oh, if she falls in love with a guy in a boarding school in a foreign land, what if she
Right.
is like brings bad name and like talks to
Hmm.
him? Oh my God!
Right,
So sort of
right,
that sort
right.
of stuff. Um,
Sure,
but
sure.
he's like, okay, so what? She'll marry the guy. That's it. Like that would be the end. Like that would be the world coming down. But yeah,
Hmm.
for a ruler man and still being in those tribal regions and being able to stand up to like more than 50 men in your own community and family, just to send your like teenage kid to school is big move. It's a big move. I
Yeah.
appreciate him on that. Yeah.
No, yeah, yeah, no, it's wonderful. And you speak about the social structure as well a lot for girls. And I love, well, first of all, the title of the book alone, where you say last to eat, last to learn, it is quite literal in that regard
Yes.
because the part where you speak about you being on the refugee camp as your family were, and all the girls around you were greatly, a lot of them were illiterate, but also hungry. And then you talk about the structure of eating in the household. And that's like a traditional Afghan. family tradition, like the norm would be that there's a hierarchy in who eats. So can you share that a little bit?
For starters, one thing that we have to understand is like it's not generally done this way, but given the structures or the poverty that's in Afghanistan right now, it's most commonly practiced. And of course, the research shows that girls go hungry to bed. Even now in Afghanistan, girls are the ones who are going hungry to bed. But then again, in the structure, I have seen it in my family. The men are served first, the boys are served with them. Then the young kids are served. Then women eat, and then with the women the older daughters eat, you know. So like those are the last lines to eat. And sometimes I'm of course challenged with it, and people are like offended by it. Oh, we don't do that, we all eat together. Do you guys though? If we do, why do women go to bed hungry? Why do young girls go to bed hungry? So in practice, if like Afghans love their daughters, I wouldn't say otherwise. But in general, if you're under the poverty line, if you're struggling with poverty, you would really want to feed a son who's going to go and do the work, who's going to bring in money, rather than the daughter who's supposed to get married. So that's the social structure. And with the refugee camps, I think majority of these young girls were malnourished. Even if they were fed, majority of them were malnourished. It's the same case even now. I was talking to one of the friends at Wellesley, and she was telling me that there have been refugees in New Jersey who wouldn't let their older daughter go to school, and then the social services came in and stepped in because they thought that she should be doing the house chores. So for me, maybe I'm the oldest child, so I'm doing a lot of that trauma healing. But that does happen. That does happen. I was fortunate and privileged enough not to go through that, but you do need to voice in your concerns on what happens around you. And that was something that did happen often around me. Yeah.
And then even with education, because for the families that did want education for their kids, it would be the boys, the males, right, first who would be considered for education, not the girls, because as you said, the structure is that the girl is supposed to be married
Yeah.
off,
Yeah.
and then she becomes part of another family structure and no longer part of what it was called the Gadkor, I believe it was called Gadkor.
So it's like when you live in a joint family, we call it Gatkur. So it's more like, okay, if you're bringing in something to the table, we're going to invest more in you. And I think it applies to everywhere in the world. It's not just Afghans, but it's highly highlighted in Afghanistan more because of the social structures and also the social norms. Is like if a girl is like supposed to be getting married at 18 and 19, and they're told to be silent all the time, they're told to be this person who's supposed to embody niceness, decency, and being kind to everyone. They don't need to worry about long term. So if it's a public school, sure, I'm gonna send you. But if it's a private school and I can only afford one child's education, I'm gonna invest in a kid who is my son, who's gonna stay with me, who's gonna take care of me in the old age. So I think that that's the sort of mentality. I mean, it's probably more like back in the day, the West, like they would invest more in the sons rather than the daughters, and it still is applied to some parts of the world today. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, quite honestly, I know America wants to be progressive and claim it's progressive, but we have those same sort of
Oh
chauvinisms
yeah,
here
yeah.
and preference for the male child and misogyny. And even recently, I was doing a report on something, and I saw that there are a lot of the southern states just a few years ago had to change the date of consent for marriage because there were men marrying like 12-year-olds
Oh
and
yeah,
11
yeah.
year
I have
olds in
seen a lot of
Tennessee.
reports that those reports scare me, and like
Yeah.
even with Britain, I think I was reading it 2 weeks ago or something that they didn't have the same policy for them, with the age to get married, and
Yeah, yeah. It's
I was
different in
so
different places.
shocked. I was
Yeah.
so shocked. Like I was like, these were the people who were preaching human rights to us.
Yeah, believe me. I mean, it's a struggle sometimes because I love my country, but I'm the first one to also call my country out. And, so we have a lot of our own things. And I read just a couple years ago that up until like I think 2000, maybe it was 2010, the youngest child to get married in America legally in Tennessee was like 9 years old or something.
Wow.
Like really. So, we have our issue our
Yeah,
issues with that
yeah,
too.
yeah. I mean, it's all over the world. Young girls are like treated this transaction. as like part of this transaction. Oh, if I murdered your brother, you're gonna give your daughter in, like, to yeah, like wash the bad, like, the blood between us because we are related. Then, and like, at the same time, like, in the US, like, women gender pay gap, or like every time you look at feminism, it's seen as such a bad light. And the same applies to the whole world. I think the same goes for other countries. But given that I'm from my own country, and I'm going to talk more about that, I think I do personally sometimes am hurt, and I feel so weird when I talk about these things, because it's my country's reality, and you really want to represent the good part of your country, but you also can't hide away from the reality of the country, that it, we are still one of the repressive countries for women, and we are still repressing a lot of women rights. There is no women rights in Afghanistan right now, and young girls rights. The part that's forgotten is this young women rights. Women at some age, certain age, when they become mothers or older, they still have some sort of power or autonomy. Young girls don't. So that's sort of hurt, like, it's hurting to see that. Yeah.
Yeah, so in that early age, there's that window where these girls really are sort of owned or controlled by the government, if you will,
Right
until
now,
they,
right now, yes, by the government.
yeah,
Back in the day, more by the social or cultural or the toxic masculinity norms that were set in
mm-hmm,
place. Oh, you're not
right,
supposed to go here. You're not supposed to show your face. You're not supposed to do that.
right,
Why?
right,
Because you're a girl.
right, right. But now, if I'm not mistaken, and please correct me, the Afghanistan government is basically the Taliban government now,
Yeah, the de
correct?
facto regime. Yeah.
Right. And so, unfortunately, with that comes a lot of the very extreme oppression of women. And that is where the banning of education for women comes from, when a really strict Sharia law, if you will, where women
Yeah.
aren't supposed to learn, right? Um, are girls completely not allowed to go to school, or is it that they can go to school to a certain age and then they have to no longer, or they're no longer allowed to go? What is the balance there?
So first we have to talk about Sharia, where it's like confused, like, oh, Sharia is a repressive sort of, like, anti-women sort of policy. If Sharia is so bad, then why is Saudi and, like, all these Middle Eastern countries still allowing their women to go to school? We are like, in the middle of two regional powers like Pakistan and Iran. They let their women go to school, so are they not Muslim enough? Like, you have to question those. But then again, coming back to Afghanistan, to a certain age, which is like from grade 1 to grade 6, which is like, starting from age 4 to until you're 12, you can go to school. But 13, post that, you can't, you're not allowed. And the next second year will just start in a week for girls, for people in Afghanistan, for young students. But girls won't be allowed to go to school. The university just started for boys, but women are not allowed to sit in the same settings. So yeah, that's the current repressive policies towards young girls.
Yeah, and that's also in addition to the social structure too, where the women, those other things are in place too, where you can't walk down the street with a man unless it's your husband, or I mean, there's all these things we hear, and then please correct me if I'm wrong, or you're not supposed to be in public with a man that's not your husband or something.
I mean, for starters, we are like a different country. Like, you don't go with someone like if you don't know them. Like, I grew up in a family where I was not allowed to go out at a certain time. I was not allowed to talk to like, unknown men and stuff like that. So, and that's normal, and I would understand why is that in place, because we come from a different culture, and that's part of our identity. That's normal. But then this sort of autonomy to make that informed decisions, like when I was 18, I volunteered with organizations where boys were there, and my father was fine with it because he didn't see anything bad in that. I was working with people, and there seemed to be boys too, so that was not bad. But in today's Afghanistan, that's extremely bad. That's not possible.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
haram.
Like you couldn't go. Like you and I were working together, and I'm like, "Hey,
Yeah.
Pashtana, let's go to lunch," and we
Oh
start
no,
walking down the street.
that's
That's
not
not.
happening. That's not
Wow.
happening. The same time, like, um, in Afghanistan, like, yes, when I was in Kandahar, I had to go everywhere with my brother, or like, somebody in my family, or a man around me. Now it's more like, I remember talking to my cousins, and he was telling me, he's like, the Taliban literally stopped a man and told him, like, is she really your wife, or are you, like, taking someone else's wife? And the guy got so pissed, and he was like, you explain to me if she's not my wife, prove it to me. And they broke into a fight and everything. For me, I was like, how horrifying it would be for a man to take a sister, a wife outside in today's Afghanistan, where they have to fight the whole world just to take her out to the doctor,
Just to walk down the street.
just to
Yeah.
take her to the doctor, or like, just to take her shopping, or like, anything of that sort. So it's a different Afghanistan right now. And in general, we do not like to, like, mix with like the male population and that, which is fine. It's not something out of the normal. People do that all over the world. But the fact that you have to prove that you are related to this person, and you have to carry your documents all day long, is something depressive. It's something sad.
Yeah, I mean, because I know to your point, I mean, I think when you are from another culture, it's very easy to dismiss other people's everyday norms as weird or strange. But reality is, respectfully, it's just not something we're familiar with. And it's not strange or weird to the people who live in it. That's their culture.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure we have our things too that are
Oh yeah,
kind of
yeah.
strange
Oh
to
yeah,
people,
yeah.
So, but you're right. When it comes to the point where you have to now prove walking down the street ID and making sure, that's when it does become more of a very, very oppressive society, which I guess is what Afghanistan it's like now under the Taliban.
Yeah, yeah, it's a repressive society where women are not allowed to work, girls are not allowed to study. If there's a domestic violence case, you cannot report it because there is no setting in place. A lot of like entities that tried helping women back in the day, they are not available anymore. There are no shelters for women. And don't get me wrong. Yes, back in the day, Afghanistan's government was corrupt. Yes, we didn't have a lot of laws that were put there in practice. But it doesn't dismiss the fact that we had a constitution that gave us the rights. So that's something we need to understand. And the most important thing is, today in Afghanistan, you just can't have a normal family time. If you are, let's say, a young married couple, you cannot go to a park and have, like, a normal day. You cannot do picnic. That's not allowed. So just for the social construction, let's forget education. Let's forget everything else. You're married. You're doing the Islam thing, the proper thing. You are following every sort of like the law here. You're properly married. You have your documents and everything, but you still can't have a good time outside.
So what would be the problem is, well, like, what is looked down upon about a husband and wife, for example, having a
Nothing,
picnic in a
nothing,
park?
nothing. Back in the day, everyone went out, enjoyed. They went to
Right, right.
Karga or like Dala. I mean, we
Yes,
are
yeah.
known for, like, Kamaris are known for, like, their Thursdays and Fridays picnics over the mountains in
Hmm.
Afghanistan. But
Like a lot of
oh,
fun and
oh,
part.
so
Yeah, yeah.
much fun, so much fun. We, our green tea and our dry fruit, and us just leaving to like any place there that has water was like an
Hmm.
obsession. But now it's more like, oh, that's not allowed. You're not supposed to be in public. It's more like erasure of public from the public
Mm.
spaces, and
Yeah,
this sort
yeah.
of, it's like sort of instilling fear in people. Like, you need to
Hmm.
fear us. That's more of the sort of thing I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's always the core of every oppressive society.
Oh yeah.
Even again with America, with a post-slavery America, we end up with a group called the Ku Klux Klan,
Yeah.
and their whole purpose was to keep the other group fearful, so they wouldn't vote, they wouldn't ever want to come out of the house. It's like it's always replicated around the world when that sort of oppression
I was watching
happens.
this movie the other day, The Help. I don't know if you know about it.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I just couldn't believe that this was a few years back in the US. Like, in my head, I couldn't believe. And then at the same time, I kept on thinking to myself, I was like, in many ways, like, people tend to think the West is better than the other countries. But in reality, they were the ones who were like abusing human rights to such an extent. Now that they have realized it, they want to make sure that everyone is on the same page. But at the same time, you have to understand, even today's government in Afghanistan is a West enabled government. Even
Yes.
today's
Yes.
policies that oppress women in Afghanistan are West enabled policies. And I don't get me wrong, there were good and bads in Afghanistan. I went to college because of the taxpayers' money in the US. I'm
Hmm.
going to accept that. I will never shy away from that. But at the same time, women and human rights were abused back in the day. They're still being abused, and the West is just standing by, and that's shocking.
Yeah. No, I know there is definitely that affiliation with the United States being involved with those policies in those different, very different countries in the Middle East, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran. Now we're having some issues, obviously, with. But I think what's important too is what you just said about people don't realize how recent certain history is.
Yeah,
And when it's not something that you're involved with, it doesn't feel like it's current. But when, like, for example, when I think about the Taliban, it's not my culture. So to me, it's just like a headline that I read about in the news. And it's kind of every now and then I'll hear something happened, a little bit of a fight. Um, but I lose sight of the fact that there's people living under this every day. You just said, people aren't coming out of the house, they can't go anywhere, and that's on top of the other construct where you said, um, in your book, that normally an Afghan woman, typically she would just be in the house
yeah, yeah. My mom is at
anyway.
the. My mom is in the house 24/7. I barely remember the last time she went out. But the point is, she had a choice and she doesn't now. That's the difference. That's the difference that you need to understand. That's the only thing you need to understand. It doesn't mean I have to be out every day. I like that's the thing. It's so hard to make others understand. It's like they're like, oh, were you threatened? No, I have the choice to go to work back in the day. Now I don't. I had the choice to go to school. Now I don't. And the same goes for like people look at the Taliban through this lens. Oh, the Taliban are repressive Afghan fighters, but nobody knows that it was University of Nebraska that sent us books that had all of that material that radicalized our next generation. Um, Alif for Anar was changed to Alif for Allah, Jim for Jihad, Mim for Mujahid. And I remember reading those sentences where my teacher would teach me, and they would be like, "Oh, I should be proud if my father is murdered or if my brother is martyred in the fight against the infidels when they were fighting the Cold War against the Russians and stuff." So imagine infiltrating into young minds at a primary level age, and you radicalize a society to an extent where people think that it's their only mission to save everyone and everything, and then you expect them to become normal, and you wouldn't even pay for reparations. You wouldn't even take the responsibility, and then you would label them, oh, never mind, these people are like that. We were not like that in the 1960s. We have been a poor country, but we were very much a very independent country. On the seventh anniversary of Afghanistan's independence 100 years ago, Malika Suraya said that independence belongs to all of us when she was talking to Oxford University. And she was like, we all deserve it. So when we all deserve it, why is our politics always being questioned? Why is our policies, our culture being infiltrated and radicalized, our religion being used against us? And the sad part is nobody realized it anyways.
Oh, and you mentioned Oxford, which is also a big part of your, I would say, your journey, which is when you were younger, about 16, I believe, you were admitted to a preparatory
Yeah.
study program at Oxford, which was like a dream come true. It's like the epitome of education for everyone in the world. And you did not go because you felt a greater calling to, well, I mean, I think you wanted to go, but you felt a greater calling to stay around and educate other young girls in Afghanistan. Talk about that decision. And I guess you don't regret it now, but at the time, talk about how you were trying to balance that decision.
I think the reason that I regretted back in the day, like, not regretted, but felt sad about it was because my mother was so much opposed to it. And my father kept on telling me, like, go study and then come back. And I'm so grateful I didn't listen to them. Go study, come back. Come back would be now, and I cannot do anything now. So no, thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Because all the work you've done in that time is amazing work. You would have never done that work if you were
Exactly.
here.
So no, thank you. And the only part is like, I was in for a preparatory program. I applied to a lot of schools in Germany, in the UK, anywhere I could find. And for me, it's like I need to end up in a good university. My dad used to make fun of me. He's like, Pashtana is obsessed with people's universities, like any big personality. She just goes and checks their universities. What university did they go to? Like,
Right.
where did this person go to? I was at one point, I was so obsessed with like the world women leaders. I checked out like,
Mm.
where did Indira Gandhi, and then it became like Oxford, right? But
Oxford,
then
yeah.
it came like she failed her Latin exam or something, and then later on she was given her degree and everything. And for me, I was like, oh, okay, like I was so obsessed to an extent I needed to know which exam did she go to or not go to,
Mm-hmm.
or like the same went for a lot of women leaders. Um, so for me, that was an obsessive sort of thing. I wanted to go to a good college. Maybe a lot of my conditioning was American television, and everyone is so obsessed
Mm.
with like going to
Yeah, yeah.
college.
Mm-hmm.
But once I made the decision, I stick to it, and I'm so proud of myself. I mean, at the end of the day, it was a preparatory program. I don't know if I would have ended up in the Oxford, like, or not.
Right,
But then
right.
at the same time, like a lot of people, 90% of the people end up in Oxford from that program. So that
Mm-hmm.
was, and the good part is like people think when I'm like saying all of this, I'm saying it out of romanticism. No, I'm not. I love Afghanistan more than anything in the world, There have been times where I have put it before my parents, which normally
Mm.
is not a case with an Afghan child. They love their parents. So for me, Afghanistan was the first priority, and I understood that if I could make a difference now, I shouldn't be waiting for it for 4 years later. Maybe I could go for my
Mm.
master's, like, somewhere or something, which I am accepted into a very high prestigious school that I cannot talk about.
Oh, well, congratulations on that.
Thank
That's
you.
great.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, taking that decision, sticking to it, doing everything. I mean, I had a lot of nervous breakdowns. I cried my eyes out. My mom did
Mm.
tell me, "You horrible kid. I told you go to the school and figure it."
As she threw the shoe at you,
Oh, all the time. Shoes, hangers. I mean, at times she would be like, just give me like, one of those Instagram side eyes, like like,
yeah,
you dumb
you
kid.
should have done it. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. But now when I talk to her, she's like, you know better. So yeah, yeah, all of that. I mean, it's at 16 I shouldn't be making those decisions, but I'm glad I did that. Yeah, and I have always been this headstrong person. I do my own decisions, and I'm a very decisive person. So I'm glad my parents respected it, though. My father respected it.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Pashtana Durrani, Afghan human rights activist and author of the amazing book Last to Eat, Last to Learn. It's stunning, especially when you talk about the disappearing girls. I want people to really read about that and understand like why they're disappearing from all the different oppressive things you highlight in the book. So thank you for being a guest today on Motivational Mondays.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.